September 11th, 2001, a day Americans will never forget. The destruction of the World Trade Center at the hands of bloodthirsty terrorists is an image forever burned into our minds. Yet despite the horror, the nation found a new resolve. Inside those buildings, selfless acts of heroism were displayed that were so profound had they been witnessed on a field of battle, they would have merited all the glory given to those who have received the Medal of Honor. Among those heroes, one man's story stands out. He was a hero before, in the jungles of Vietnam, under a legendary commander in one of the toughest fights in U.S. history. Nha Trang Valley, Central Highlands of South Vietnam, November 14, 1965. Elements of the 1st Battalion, 7th Cavalry, touched down in a clearing dubbed Landing Zone X-Ray. Their mission? To find and kill enemy forces suspected to be in the area. They would not have far to look, as 3 battalions of North Vietnamese sat waiting on the nearby Chu Pong Mountain, eager to get a shot at the Americans. Fighting quickly erupted, as then Lieutenant Colonel Hal Moore built a defensive perimeter around the edge of the landing zone. The next morning, shortly after 9 a.m., the men from the 2nd Battalion, 7th Cavalry, arrived at X-Ray to reinforce the soldiers under Lieutenant Colonel Moore. Among them was one of the few soldiers on the battlefield to have combat experience, a platoon leader in Bravo Company by the name of Rick Rescorla. A native of Cornwall, England, Rick Rescorla grew up idolizing the men of the U.S. 29th Infantry Division stationed near his hometown. He would join the British Army, fighting the communist insurgency in Cyprus, and later served with the Northern Rhodesia Police. He eventually moved to the United States, where he joined the U.S. Army and was made a platoon leader in the 2nd Battalion, 7th Cavalry Regiment of the 1st Cavalry Division. At Landing Zone X-Ray, the situation was dire. The vastly outnumbered Americans were nearly surrounded by well-trained and motivated North Vietnamese soldiers. Yet Rescorla's confidence never wavered. He walked among his men's foxholes, singing Cornish songs, including a version of the famed old military march, Men of Harlech, and leading cheers to raise morale. A fellow soldier, Larry Gwynn, said, "I saw Rick Rescorla come swaggering into our lines with a smile on his face, an M79 on his shoulder, his M16 in one hand, saying, 'Good, good, good. I hope they hit us with everything they've got tonight. We'll wipe them up.' His spirit was catching. The enemy must have thought an entire battalion was coming to help because of all the screaming and yelling. The men of the 1st Cav held out at X-Ray, eventually beating back the tremendous North Vietnamese onslaught, due in no small part to the leadership of Rick Rescorla. He was a rock on the battlefield, steady and strong, and would be awarded the Silver and Bronze Stars along with the Purple Heart. Hal Moore called him the best platoon leader I ever saw. And it was Rick Rescorla's photo that adorned the cover of General Moore and Joseph Galloway's classic account, We Were Soldiers Once and Young. Rick Rescorla returned to the United States and retired into civilian life. Several years later, he took charge of security for Morgan Stanley Dean Winter, located in the South Tower of the World Trade Center in New York City. In 1992, he warned the Port Authority, the owners of the World Trade Center, of the danger of a potential terrorist attack which might bring the buildings down by planting a truck bomb laden with explosives next to one of the load-bearing columns in the basement. Yet he was ignored. And in 1993, Islamic terrorists detonated such a bomb. While it failed to bring the towers down, the attack killed 6 and injured over 1,000. It also proved Rescorla's fears that the Twin Towers were already a major terrorist target. He was there that day and was instrumental in the evacuation, being the last man to leave. Recognizing this would not be the last attempt to bring down the buildings, Rescorla urged his company to move. He believed they were too ripe a target for such truck bombings or even cargo planes loaded with explosives or chemical weapons en route from the Middle East. However, Morgan Stanley's lease did not end until 2005, so he was told a move would not be possible. Under the circumstances, he did what he could. He installed generators and lighting in the stairwells and drilled the employees twice a year, forcing them to walk all the way down the stairs of one of the tallest skyscrapers in the world, earning him more than his share of grumbling and ridicule. His preparation, however, would pay off in ways nobody could ever imagine. 8:46 a.m., September 11th, 2001. American Airlines Flight 11 crashes into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. Over the intercom in the South Tower, authorities told everyone to stay put. They were safe where they were. Rescorla would have none of it and immediately started evacuating Morgan Stanley employees. He was everywhere that morning, reported to have been seen in the stairwell from the 10th to the 72nd floors, calmly and confidently encouraging his terrified co-workers down the stairs to safety. "Be proud to be an American. Everybody will be talking about you tomorrow," he told them over a bullhorn. And as in Vietnam over 35 years earlier, he began to sing "God Bless America" and defiant Cornish songs, once again including his adaptation of Men of Harlech. 9:03 a.m., United Airlines Flight 175 smashes into the South Tower. Undeterred, Rescorla continued the evacuation. He called his wife Susan, telling her he was getting his people out. His last words to her before hanging up were, "You made my life." By the time the second plane hit the South Tower, Rescorla had evacuated most of Morgan Stanley's 2,700 employees. Yet despite this, he rushed back inside along with 3 of his deputies. When told that he had to leave, he replied, "As soon as I make sure everyone else is out." 9:59 a.m., the South Tower collapses. 29 minutes later, the North Tower falls. Over 2,700 people were killed in the disaster. It should have been more, if not for the planning and leadership of Rescorla. It is certain that many of Morgan Stanley's 2,700 employees would have died when the South Tower collapsed. Instead, only 6 were killed, including Rick Rescorla and his deputies. He was last seen rushing up to the 10th floor stairwell of the South Tower, determined to once again be the last man out. Rick Rescorla's story of valor and sacrifice in one of our nation's darkest hours is one that every American should know. Many have worked to make this the case. In his memory, Susan Rescorla created the Richard C. Rescorla Memorial Foundation, and his story was told by James Stewart in the best-selling book Heart of a Soldier. And to date, nearly 31,000 individuals have signed a petition for Rick to receive our nation's highest civilian award, the Presidential Medal of Freedom. For his heroism, honor, and nobility, and for being responsible for saving the lives of nearly 3,000 people, the American Veterans Center is proud to help share Rick Rescorla's story and to salute him as the recipient of the 2008 Edward J. Herlihy Citizenship Award.